So we got this fabulous topic, building a digital bridge between R&D and manufacturing. Come back to that in a moment and set it up. I want to just introduce our panel. So, without further ado, let's start with Greg. Greg is head of cGMP, Strategic Supply and Operations, Chief Manufacturing Officer at the mRNA Center of Excellence at Sanofi. If you come from a different part of the world, like the UK or the continental part of Europe, it's Sanofi. But in this part of the world, it's Sanofi. So we all know where Greg comes from.
We do have someone from France who can tell us proper.
Sanofi. So let's ask each of our, as I introduce them, each of our panelists to just say a few words about what they do, where they are, what their challenges are, and so on. Great.
Sure. So yeah, currently I run clinical manufacturing for all things sourcing and manufacturing for mRNA and LNP. Most of my career I've spent in small biotech on that bridge between research, development, and manufacturing for complex formulations. So these are the types of things that in the 90s we really needed really process understanding and process knowledge when everyone else was just doing small molecules and biologics were starting. So I did take one little foray outside of our industry, working on instrument and reagents that I may be able to draw from some of those experiences in today.
Thanks, Greg. Moving on to Matt. Matt is here in Boston. Matt is head of Digital Pioneering Medicines and Development Systems at Flagship. Matt.
Great to be here. So I work at with Pioneering Medicines, which is a division within Flagship Pioneering, which invents bioplatform companies. We have a portfolio around 40 companies. Vijay will probably go into it in greater detail. Most notably, Flagship Pioneering has founded Moderna and Seres and Denali. And right now, I've transitioned into this role. I was previously at a CDMO startup called Resilience, and I'm motivated, and a lot of the work I do is actually related to my experiences that were formed at Alkermes, where a lot of the work we did was focused on translating CMC knowledge into our manufacturing facilities in Wilmington, Ohio, and Athlone, Ireland.
Thanks, Matt. And then we have Rachelle. Rachelle is also here in Boston at Vertex. Rachelle is Director of Manufacturing Systems, Automation, and Digital Strategy. Rachelle?
Yeah, thank you. So I've been with Vertex coming up on 10 years now. Previous to that, I was in a biologics organization, so kind of started off in site improvements, data and analytics projects, and transitioned into automation. And so from the automation role, that's where I switched to Vertex and focused on continuous manufacturing and automation for quite a while before having the opportunity to switch over and start up our digital transformation program. And so I've been looking across our manufacturing needs, a lot of collaboration, smaller companies, so where we can partner and look for kind of collaborations with our supply chain side, our development side, and kind of bridge across all of these different areas through our different programs and conversations, and really just looking to learn so much from you all today as part of this conversation.
Thanks, Rachelle. And then we have Mark. Mark is from Manchester, England, so we should probably feel some sympathy for Mark right now, because he's a lifelong Manchester United fan. And in about 55 minutes, Manchester City are going to start beating the hell out of Tottenham Hotspur. So, a little bit of, if he starts crying at any point during the next few hours, just sort of whimpering on the floor, there's a lot of history there. But Mark is a managing director at Accenture. He runs the Global Scientific Informatics Services. Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it reminds me of the weekend with the game where it summed up our season, really. The rains opened up, we got soaked on the way home. There was almost a biblical flood. But, yeah, Mark Fish, I'm Managing Director at Accenture for the last 5 years, really focused on scientific informatics and the laboratory space and the data that goes around the science. I started my life as a chemist and back in the early days, and spent a lot of my time actually in Boston with various companies, Thermo Fisher for 10 years, and did a lot of work in automation for a company called Brooks Automation, became Azenta, where I ran, one of the areas was running a business unit that sold sample prep equipment into analytical development that then got rolled out to QC processes for complex delivery devices. So I think it's fascinating. Building bridges, I think that's a great, I like being called the bridge builder. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Mark. So for those of you who are very detail-oriented, you might have looked at the agenda on the way here and thought we're going to have 5 panelists. So we were intending to have Pat here. Pat is the Senior Vice President at CMC at Salugen here in Boston. Unfortunately, Pat had a family issue this week and sends his apologies and can't be here with us. So we do have 4 wonderful panelists and a great topic. So thinking back to the topic, building a digital bridge between R&D and manufacturing, it's a really quite provocative topic, and hopefully it's a topic that whips you all into a frenzy of questions and discussions in the next hour, because it's deliberately worded as an active statement, building. It's also quite a big assumption that we do need to build a bridge. Some of you might be thinking the bridge is built or we don't need one. You know, there can be extremes in a room and differences of opinion. You don't all have to just ask questions. You could say, you are wrong, we have done this, and share an observation. So it allows us to really play with this space quite nicely, building a bridge between R&D and manufacturing. How far have we gone? How far do we have to go? What are the questions? What are the challenges when we look at technology and people and processes and the whole gamut? That is the space we can play in the next 55 minutes. I have my own methodology for gently guiding my colleagues up here through that, but you're going to interrupt them and ask them questions, and we're going to go off wherever you want, okay? Everybody ready for that? Lots of nodding, lots of energy, nobody asleep, the iPads and the iPhones are away. Wonderful. So we're going to bring it to life to start with by asking each one of our panelists to tell a little story or an experience, their own experience with this premise that we need to build a bridge. What has been a challenge or an observation that in their own careers to date that would illustrate this challenge to us all in the room today? And we're going to start with Greg.
Okay, so yeah, my story is probably one of the scariest parts of my career because it was my first jump to real startup, like I was employee number 5 and first CMC employee at a company with a new technology. And you know, the literature data was great. The you know, some of the preclinical data, they had raised a good deal of money, and so I show up, and first thing I asked is, okay, you know, this is a technology. Let's do a technology transfer into me from what it was found. And you know, this came from academia, so the postdoc and PhD students said, well, it's in the patent, right? That was basically all of their process knowledge, the example in the patent. And my gosh, of course, we could not reproduce it at all. It was at microgram scale. So fortunately, you know, the IP was very strong. It was all about the final product, right, and what the product looked like. But everything about how you got there and how you made it, and it was a fairly complex product, had nothing to do with what they did. We essentially had to redesign that whole process, and I committed at that moment. You know, we are going to invest heavily in, you know, process and recipe knowledge, and this was before the days of a much digital, right, early 2000s, and so a lot of relational databases built, a lot of Excel back then. But I said it was scary, and that was because I was still young. I was in my 20s, had 2 young kids, not a lot of financial security. So I was like, left a pretty good job for it. What the hell did I get into? But in the end, it did work out. We invested a lot in process knowledge. These are the days of kind of inventing the term of product by process, and you know, the formulation really defines the product in this complex formulation space. So,
Great, perfect example, Greg. Only a couple of years ago then.
my grades are showing, trust me.
I didn't say that. Matt, give us an example. Bring it to life for us from your background.
Yeah, I think you know, my experience with CMC was really colored by when I, you know, started in one company and inherited global chromatography data systems, global ELN that had just existed. And the ELN in particular was really implemented as a secondary ELN to be Part 11 compliant for analytical development QC teams. And I remember sitting with an analytical chemist who was, you know, trying to prepare stability technical reports for filing for one of our products. And they walked me through the entire process, and, you know, I was like, okay, like, where's that data in the ELN? How are you recording that? And it's just Excel documents embedded inside of the ELN because it's an on-prem ELN. I was like, all right, well, my roadmap for this will be we need to upgrade the ELN, we need to roll out sample management, and like everything will be great. And then for the next 4 years, I spent my time trying to kill that ELN out of existence once I realized that like all the technical debt we had built up over time and the way that the sample management modules would work and the database was structured wouldn't actually help us materialize a process-centric understanding of the data. And I remember at one point talking to a mentor who I had at that company who would describe the R&D lifecycle process. And I remember him being in a room, drawing on a whiteboard and saying, like, here's discovery. And then he drew like a little line up on the board. And he's like, this is formulation development and process development. And he goes, the discovery team goes like this, and they throw it over the wall into formulation development and into process development, analytical development. So ever since then, from supporting terrible tools, that's kind of been my motivation for why I left that organization to try to build something new at a CDMO startup, and then I realized that was too far away from the innovators, and that's why I'm at where I'm at now, because there's a really great opportunity for what we're going to be doing right now with the CMC teams we're working on, where we get to start from scratch and
Don't
really
get too
think through
excited
that
about
process.
the future yet. Save that.
I know.
So how many people in the room relate to the story that Matt just shared? Yep. How many were responsible for building those terrible systems? Sorry. Had to put that out there. Rachelle.
Sure, I just want to share a little bit about kind of our experience with Vertex and continuous manufacturing and the model that we use there. So being, again, kind of a smaller company, and we're not really focused on trying to be a commercial manufacturing organization. We invest heavily in research and development, and like everyone, want to move really fast. So those internal manufacturing capabilities that we have need to support that go fast, getting molecules to market as everyone does. And so we have them co-located. We're manufacturing in Boston, in the Seaport, right down the street from our development space. Those development teams can come down and they work closely with us in order to get these processes through. And so that in itself does an enormous amount to facilitate tech transfer. I mean, decisions are made on whether, what comes internal, what comes external. There's only so much capacity and space. But where we can leverage those close partnerships and relationships, that's where we're really taking an advantage of the proximity of these teams, really trying to use our internal capabilities and that knowledge to launch our products. And then other teams get to take up the challenge of the tech transfer to the CMOs, but we've done a lot of that internal knowledge and learning. And so this has also played into a lot of our digital manufacturing strategy, our systems implementations. We're still at a stage where we just need to get those foundational pieces in. So we do talk about tech transfer, and should we be focusing on this? Should we be having a core work stream looking at that tech transfer piece? But at the moment, we're revamping our ELN and trying to get something that's going to work for us, and we're getting the MES and the LIMS in place. And before we can really worry about all those connections, yes, we want to know what data we're heading towards for those teams, but the focus at the moment is more on the foundational systems that underlie that to make sure we have a good foundation before we start to layer on top of it.
So that's like saying, nice talk, Yash, but maybe in a year or so.
It's all important. I want to learn so we're there when we're ready for it. But we just got to solve the problems. When we talk to the teams, it's, well, that's great, but we do that, X number of times a year. I'm trying to get data back out of my ELN every day, and I can't do that. I want to do predictive, modeling and analysis, but
that's great.
Let's solve that first.
Okay, Mark, take us back to the depths of depression in your past. Share some horror stories.
Yeah, I find it quite inspiring, right? Rachelle saying about co-locating the teams, because that's so not the case in a lot of places. I mean, we talked about languages, that manufacturing and development often speak different languages. We have a lot of workshops where we bring clients' teams together from both the sides, and we have cartoons which show paper being thrown over walls, and sadly that resembles reality a lot of the time today. That common language is, they might be electronic documents, but they're still documents being passed over to maybe even partners, external partners. So the challenges are huge, and finding that common language is maybe a little bit like, again, to go back to the French and English thing, building that channel tunnel from both sides. How do you get the MSAT team connecting properly with the farm side team so you can get that flow of data? I mean, early in my career, I saw a lot of that where we were selling automation systems that really looked at endpoint QC analysis, CQAs for complex products. And you'd work with the development team building a system that kind of really gave you the voice of the product. And then when that got rolled out into manufacturing networks, sometimes the data that provided wasn't always what the manufacturing network liked to hear. And so having that transition and being able to kind of have a data-driven dialogue about the process and the product, you know, we see the interest in all clients about going faster, being more efficient, getting more molecules to market. And I do think in the development space, it's such an area of opportunity, because unlike clinical, where there's been a lot of digital investment, a lot of transformation, platforms and tools, in the development space, it's been underinvested in chronically, it's my point of view, and it's just ripe to being transformed with modern tools. So great to hear some of the progress that's being made to bridge that gap and become more digital.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. So 4 points of view there are sort of related to experience and sort of, you know, coming to this topic and going forward. Any other stories in the room that anybody wants to share? This is your moment. This is your moment to shine and almost be on the panel. Oh, you're a miserable bunch. Yes.
I'll give you a backward story.
Go on then.
I was an antibody engineer in discovery.
He wants to give you a microphone, I think. I don't know why, but we'll pretend.
So I was an antibody engineer in discovery, and I was very curious if the assays I was doing for drug-like properties and manufacturing were actually predictive of drug-like properties and manufacturability of biologics. And so somebody gave me access to the LIMS and the data from the QC labs, and 2 weeks later, I finally cleaned up the data enough to do a single XY plot to answer my question if the things were predictive. So
2 weeks was good.
And I was always very interested in how do you go backwards.
Right. No, that's a wonderful point. Thank you. Any others? What we're going to do? Oh, no, save you. No, exhausting. So what we're going to do is I've got 4 themes here, 4 themes that I believe are sort of driving change in this industry, in this space. So I'm going to go through these themes one at a time, because that's the way British people think. And each time I go through a theme, I'm going to pick on a panelist or panelists and ask them to share their perspective of whether this theme is actually going to help us build this bridge and why. This is your opportunity again to join into the conversation. I'll keep encouraging you until you do. So we're going to start with a broad statement that I think Mark just alluded to. The faster pace of pharmaceutical development is a statement that we read quite often right now, that things are moving through that part of the pharmaceutical business at a much more rapid pace. Innovative trial designs, expedited regulatory programs, all kinds of reasons behind it, but we observe that pharmaceutical development is moving at a much faster pace than it probably has been at any point in its history. So with that in mind, is that going to help us build this bridge, and how? Mark?
Yeah, I think there's been a real shift in expectations over the last decade, and notably in the last 4 years post-COVID. The COVID really did a few things. Really, it kind of proved that we could be more digital, and we got through it. Regulators took way bigger risks than ever before in the way that filing occurred, and now we're all trying to figure out how do we make that walk speed, light speed way of working the norm. There's almost an expectation that's been created that we can do much faster, and we're still trying to work out what that really means. So I think the expectation there to go fast is bigger than ever. I kind of looked at some data recently, which is still quite shocking. The complete review letters that the FDA issues if they're not happy with the filing and they're asking for additional information. Somebody did a study of 51 of these letters over a period of almost a decade, I think it was. 47% of those were due to lacking of detail in the CMC processes. There are CMC reasons behind it. So is it important? Yes. I think we have to get better at getting right first time. So you know, having the right tooling is really important, but along with that, we shouldn't, to go fast, there's a huge change in process and people and workforce as well. And so the change, the technology is one part of the solution, but the change in mentality, getting that bridge between all the way through the development process, through the silos, de-siloing and getting people working together and handing that over to manufacturing is really challenging, particularly because the investment to the people making the investment might not be the direct beneficiaries of that extra work or extra time or change, actually. It's more change rather than extra work. So it's how do we incent across the organisation for people to embrace the new ways of working, new tools, to see the bigger picture.
So very specifically, you would argue that because there is a faster pace of pharmaceutical development and manufacturing will build a tighter bridge. It will be a consequence.
I think the leading companies will figure out how to do that effectively.
I was going to say, I think the winners will, and the losers won't, right? So I think especially in smaller company ecosystems. So, I think about like being close, like to each other, even organizations that are in the same floor and in the same office space aren't close to each other. And so I think the organizations that will win will have a collective culture and view of how to, go fast, right? Because what's needed in research is different than what's needed in CMC until it's not. And then everyone needs the same thing to aggregate all the information together at that pivotal milestone moment.
I mean, Rachelle, to some degree you say you're doing this and you've got a culture of doing things quickly, research into development as a company. Could you share a little bit more about the learnings and what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that everything's perfect by any means, but there is that kind of collaboration. It was actually a recent reorganization to bring the teams under the same organization, because this was working even before. Sort of that was the model, but there is that just proximity. There's meetings. There's like an earlier stage in trying to kind of look forward, look back into sort of what worked in our last products, what's working now in manufacturing, having some of that knowledge transfer back to the development teams, trying to sort of leverage these platform approaches as well, and so that we can kind of monopolize on what has worked previously and not start from scratch. There is a desire to have continued improvement and access to our data, as everyone's knowing and feeling. I do feel sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by readily serving up answers and data. It feels probably to those at the higher levels that this must have been automated and the answers all came from, just being able to generate a report quickly, when it was actually people like killing themselves, manually digging it out of systems. I don't think there's always a view of how much work and where we're really at on being able to extract that data. Could we find it? Did somebody have to run off and re-execute an experiment? Like being able to get more visibility to those pain points and solve all of that will really also help us to go fast. But that's what, that's kind of what it currently takes, is to have that data available and to start to share it. And I mean, we still have plenty of things that are in PowerPoints, and that's how the knowledge transfer is happening. But moving that into places where we can leverage it for the next products is kind of where we're headed.
How does this theme relate to folks in the room, the pace of pharmaceutical development? Yeah.
Yeah, on your point, exactly. The trend is to pick up a bigger hammer and try harder when you go faster, right?
Well, I'm glad somebody said that. Yeah.
It's actually what I've seen is quite the opposite. That the faster a program goes, the less likely teams are to embrace new tools, because it means they have to figure out a new process.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they just spend more hours and you throw more people at it, and it's done. And you probably burn a few people out in the process.
Yeah, I get.
One of the challenges that we have is we're trying to incorporate QbDVision into our CMC, into our tech transfer, but the speed that we're trying to go at is really challenging for people to learn how to use a new tool, implement new ways of working. Greg, you see this. Greg's my boss, if you don't know. Anyways, and what people end up doing is they default back to the old tools, the old ways of working, the ways that they're comfortable with, rather than trying to learn this new technology or incorporate a new business process. And we end up just kind of in the same old. I was glad to see that it's building a bridge between R&D and manufacturing and not burning the bridge between R&D and manufacturing.
See, that's what I like.
There's something between R&D and manufacturing. And I think if you can implement the digital tools and the digital ways of working correctly, maybe it's the same landscape and you don't need that bridge. You can eliminate that need. I think that's really what we should be striving to do. But it's hard. It's a real challenge to do that.
I mean, that's why I asked I love the way you put it, because that's the way I wanted to re-ask the question, because faster pace doesn't necessarily mean you do anything that Yash talked about at all.
Right. But I
Quite
think
the opposite, actually.
the way Matt articulated it, the winners will embrace it is
Matt's very
actually,
eloquent.
it doesn't take a lot to go fast, but to go fast successfully,
Yeah,
right? And,
yeah.
and actually deliver right first time.
Yep.
You can go blind fast, but if you don't, actually embrace a new way of working, use your data, have accessibility to it.
Did we have a comment here?
Yeah.
The microphone doesn't help you in case you didn't hear what I said earlier. And mind the coffee.
Alright, this
Yeah.
helps.
Just shout. Shout and hold it in front of you.
Yeah,
and it
so
looks good.
Yong Wang, I'm from Takeda. I've been with Takeda, like Legacy Shire, for over 15 years now. So we talk about fast to whatever, right? That's what I've been hearing all the time. I'm sure in all the other pharmaceutical companies, that fast to patient, fast to market, fast to approval, right? There are many different ways we can do to increase the pace. That is inevitable. That's the direction we are all going, right? The bridge between manufacturing and R&D, that's just one path that we can go, just like you said. This is just one area. There is also phase-appropriate process development, right? Phase-appropriate regulatory approach, right? So there are many other things. But purely from the fast pace on this particular topic, from research to manufacturing, I actually have a question for all the maybe all the panelists, is that we talk about tech transfer is a major part of it. There is always a goal, or maybe a blue sky type of approach. How can we do tech transfer faster, right? In the digital world, when we are applying the digital approaches, digital tech transfer, what is the target that you think that we can achieve in terms of tech transfer of a new molecule from R&D, from process development, farm science, to our manufacturing factory or operations? So that's probably my first question.
Just the first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Getting going now. So who's going to go?
I mean, of course, like many questions, right, part of the answer is it depends. If it's a completely new technology and you need a new facility, new equipment, then, right, that's going to be more the rate-limiting step. But, a lot of our tech transfers as a platform, as you referred to, you're leveraging existing know-how, existing processes, existing analytical methods, and then, if you've done a good job with your knowledge management, then you can do it potentially very quickly. I mean, we run a manufacturing suite where we're actually manufacturing a different product every week in mRNA, leveraging the platform. The tech transfer phase goes, about 3 months back, and they're all running in parallel because there are knowledge differences or recipe differences, but you can achieve quite quickly if you're leveraging a platform. But again, it depends. I don't want to say that you can do everything in 12 weeks if you need a new unit operation and you need to implement new equipment, for example. So.
And the dependency is largely like the organizational context, right? So, we suffer from the same tension that you mentioned, Rachelle, about the need for foundations, but we don't want to be in the business of only doing foundations. And so one of the intentional reasons why we're exploring QbDVision is because it gives us our working backwards mechanism to instantiate a knowledge framework from the beginning and then say, this is the target from what ELN, LIMS, or any real system is required to have as terms of parameterized data collection, whether it's internal labs, external labs, and CROs, early stage material characterization studies. Most of our work will be external, so a lot of what we can do is set the standard for internalization and ingestion of the data from CDMOs. So that's the reason why we started it earlier than we would typically need. That's just one strategy. We're seeing challenges where we don't apply that in other areas of research, and we would benefit from having more structure and rigor because then we could automate a lot of the work there as well.
Great.
But yeah, just one thing to add, I think it's about knowledge management and process understanding and transferring that efficiently as possible. And one thing I see is one of the ways people are genuinely getting velocity is by doing simulation and modeling first, taking that. So you're creating digital assets that embody that understanding of the process fundamentally the process. And they can be transferred and be super useful when you get into manufacturing if you have that direct process model to simulate what's changed. So I think it's the knowledge, it's the data, and increasingly it'll be digital models that will be that help accelerate. It's terrible though, everybody starts the limbs again and rekeys all the data for every site and things like that. That shouldn't happen, but it does.
So I have a slightly different question, kind of a challenge of how do you teach the organization to slow down in order to go faster? The analogy I draw is if you want to run a marathon with no training, it's going to take you forever to get to the finish line. If you spend a little bit of time training, you might take longer to get to the starting line, but you'll be able to get to the finish line that much faster.
Wise words.
So, the challenge that I often see is, and the bridge building analogy is a great one. You see these modern technologies of building bridges, these prefab segments, where, they'll lay it in place in no time. Still needs the footings.
I mean, honestly, I share the sentiment. We use that phrase all the time, go slow to go fast. It's not easy, it's more managing up, right? And it's convincing the business that to have a longer term horizon, right? You give me, yes, I can't get that first product into the clinic and I'd rather not get it in 6 months. I'd rather get you 3 products in 15. So, but it is, I would say, negotiation, more of almost a business negotiation internally. I don't know if that's kind of what you were getting at, but you're right? And usually the managing up is not CMC people, right? It's people who don't necessarily have the good appreciation of that.
Got one more here, then I'm going to move the topic on.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important question, and I'm seeing that also through the years. I think there is opportunity. I think it's optimistic to say that we can shrink the time, right, to go to clinical trials. But I think CMC has an important role because you can work with the clinical trial folks and try to understand exactly what the needs of manufacturing and development is. So then you can reflect that to those folks and say, like, we need this time to give you the material, right? But I'm trying to echo what I think John, my colleague, said about trying to implement QbDVision and also failing. I think it's a very important tool, but as a lesson learned, we try to say that we need to approach that like we putting like a different project, a demo project, just to implement the tool, right? Because I'm not underestimating the digital tool here. I'm just saying you need to invest the time and do like a demo project to say how we can move from here to here to here. If you're trying to implement it to a project that is running now, you're never going to be able to do it. Like it's too fast. You are running too fast.
Yep.
They need to be separate. That's my experience.
Maybe to add to my answer to your question a little bit is the one success I've had a little bit managing up is you actually have to be quantitative about it, like actually, and sometimes you're pulling these numbers, from somewhere, but a probability of success, right? And if you can, have some credibility behind, what, if we actually wait, our probability of success, the return on investment will be this, and there's always a finance person in the room, and that usually resonates with them. So.
Good point. Yep.
Yeah, it's the same for like that sponsor who has that quality over speed mindset of, and the like longer term vision, who can really like set the pace to say, this is going to be something that, if we find a new solution, we're just scrapping all of our current work versus like take the time to build it so that you have replaceable components that you can kind of future-proof what you're doing. Really, yeah, it's managing up because it's got to come from the top down to really be able to have that capacity to say, I'm going to take an extra few months and get this right. So.
In some cases, as someone being in digital, you have to let them fail, too. Like you can only shine a flashlight on the problem so much, and you kind of have to just let it happen, and then have them come back and say, okay, actually, let's work together and collaborate on like a solution. And I think I've seen that kind of play out.
Never waste a good failure, right?
People love a quick win. It's
Yeah.
so much.
Okay, thanks guys. That was really a good discussion, I think, around pace of pharmaceutical development. What we're looking for here is, as we look at the macro, will the macro help us build this bridge or not? That's the question. So another observation about our industry that we all relate to and all read about is the increasing complexity of product development. So we're thinking there about new modalities, product specifications are broadened to include both device and software components, substantially increasing complexity associated with the product and the development of the product. Will this help us build this bridge? Specifically staying on topic here, not talking more generally, staying on topic, the complexity of the product. Going to go to you, Greg, first of all.
Sure. I mean, this one obviously resonates with me, given my background. As I said, I've been working on these complex formulations where it's not a single molecule that's you're defining your product. I'd like to say yes, it will help. I mean, what I can say definitively is it helps necessitate the need for better knowledge management and digitalization, and a lot of times, right, the necessity will really help drive it. But in my experience, it hasn't necessarily made it easier, especially in those early days when we were some of the only companies, Alchemy's being one of them, actually working on these more complex formulations. But I will say, with the explosion of advanced therapeutics and cell therapy, gene therapy, almost everything is complex. So I think the appreciation is growing. And
so the complexity will be a useful device to build the bridge.
Yes, I would.
Got you there eventually. That was a struggle.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other opinions on the panel around complexity of product driving building a bridge between R&D and manufacturing?
Well, I think everybody's sort of talked about it's very hard to bring new approaches into existing product lines or things that are already in flight. So when there are new areas of innovation, new science, that they might be good places to start by trying to tackle things differently. Get on top of the foundations, pay down some of the technical debt, and look at how you can use new ways of working. I think the gentleman over there was saying, model a new process on something that's new, which is probably good advice. Certainly something we advocate with clients when they're looking at new science, new therapeutics. That might be a good area to think about. It helps justify the business case as well for the innovation if it's connected to something new as well.
Folks in the room relate to the complexity opportunity, particular businesses, or? We would love you to use the mic. We're not quite sure why, but we'd love you to.
In my opinion, I agree that the complexity of products amplifies the need to collaborate better, I think, to Greg's point. But I wonder if we're set up in a way for success with regards to a specific aspect of the bridge itself. So to bridge on the bridge analogy, a good bridge, I'd say, enables two-way traffic, and a really good bridge enables two-way traffic at all times. So in my opinion, I think if we're moving more complex molecules and products from R&D to manufacturing, it also amplifies the need to enable that feedback loop. I think there was an example there in the back of, are we setting R&D up for success to understand how their product or process actually behaved? Because when we think about success factors, the need to change, like a lot of use cases come up like tech transfer, meet patients faster, reduce tech transfer cycle time. Yeah, but if we enable that feedback loop in an intelligent way, it also contributes to R&D's ability to be effective. So that was a long-winded way to say, are we set up in a way with our messaging and our need for change that actually serves R&D in a way that's helpful?
No, it's a great point.
Any comments back?
I mean, we actually talked a little bit pre-meeting about we even set up structurally for it, and that's I think you're making a point that we might close on, but yeah, I think the feedback back to our research, because one of the challenges is when you have more complexity and research is always on to the next thing, and they need to invest more on the next thing, so they don't often have time for that feedback, and vice versa. So, and again, upper management doesn't always support the resource needs for that greater complexity, but yeah, you articulated it very well.
Next gen yield, or it's always the next best and greatest and more complex molecule. We did that one, so let's get crazier. So I just want to make sure that whatever we do, we're feeding that as well.
I think it goes to the previous question as well on, do we take the time to do it right? And is there a thought like, this is the first one, it's really complex, like just go figure it out and whatever it takes? And then that vision towards, we know we're going to be doing this lots more times in the future, so take the time to get the right structure, to have the right collaboration and documentation as you go. So like the first time, the complexity, that's going to be like a different case than like knowing and planning ahead for, this is the way we're going to be working, and we need to actually put the structure in place.
Yeah, one of the challenges, I guess, before we move on to the third topic is probably that if we did a Venn diagram of increasing complexity and faster pace, we'd probably get significant overlap. Just summarizing all of the last 20 minutes of my life. The third topic, advancing technologies. This is something close to everybody's heart in the room and part of the reason many of us get up in the morning. So innovations in both automation, digitization, production systems. We touched a little bit on nurturing new talent and training new talent on these capabilities. Probably bundle in here as well, doing a lot more or in different ways with external partners and strategic partnerships and collaborations playing in this space. So as we exploit advancing technologies, of which there are many and varied, will that help build the bridge, Mark?
Yeah, it's
because it never has yet.
No, I think as well. I think as people can get overwhelmed by technology. We see that a lot, and it's so if you just lead with the technology and drive with the technology, people will disconnect from it, won't adopt it. So I think it's really important to think about how it impacts and changes the workforce. Give the people who will be living the change the right tools. Yeah, and I don't mean like technology tools. I mean the right skills to really adopt what it means from a process perspective. Give them the guidance and the help for that change.
I mean, the pace of development of new technologies we all talk about happening at a more rapid rate than ever in our experience in this industry across, instrumentation, software, capabilities, span the whole spectrum. So I guess at the heart of this question, as that pace continues, with all the challenges that you just said, does that mean we have to build this bridge or not? Or do we just fail with the advancement of new tech because we're not very good at it or something?
Well, I think there's two things. You have to think from the people who will be adopting the change, that change management aspect there. But also you've got to be really crisp on the why. And a lot of organisations aren't very good at articulating why are we doing all of these changes. So to have that top-down messaging on why this is important, and having that right and crisp is really hard when you've got, from development and manufacturing trying to work together, getting that joined up messaging to, as an organisation, we need to transform to, for this reason. It's hard to get that messaging right from what I see.
Matt, what do you think?
I think the uncertainty around generative AI applications leads to people making assumptions around like where it will be beneficial and where it won't be beneficial. But I think no matter what, like organizations need to begin training their personnel because it will start enabling this bridge to be built, because even for organizations that don't take a leap into structuring and harmonizing data, like they will get the benefit if they know how to prosecute their data sets, even if they're unstructured, using some of these tools. So I think like the general technology proliferation, particularly with AI, even if it's not ready right now, is like we're on the precipice of GPT-5 coming, and like to the point of translation, GPT-4 got announced yesterday, and they did all these demonstrations about translation and being able to live translate. That's exactly the metaphor that Yash used in his keynote around like being able to kind of have these foundational elements that we can bridge between the two different groups. I think the groups that use some of the frameworks that are being introduced either by QbDVision or elsewhere will be able to use those technologies even faster.
Opinion is in the room around advancing technologies. Yes.
As the engineer, often it's just difficult enough to get the process written down, because it's always changing and there's always continuous improvement. And so the requirements that come from technology, especially when it comes towards the equipment used to manufacture or just test the technology, more data means more requirements, not always tied to parameters that are tied to CQAs. I struggle with just, is this really a requirement, or is this a requirement because you had to set this in your system in order to run? And so I think it does complicate the DOEs that are performed. It challenges just the data that's generated in the development reports and how it translates into what's actually the recipe. So it's just kind of my feelings, because I struggle so much with, do I need to buy this? Do I need to spend this extra money? Do I need to build this massive site?
Yep. Anybody want to build off that? Very realistic point of view there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the combination of what you said and what was said about the why, you know, I think there's no question that these technologies can help bridge, but I do think you first need an alignment on the why and the what, right? If everyone's just using different tools or the next greatest thing, right? So you do need, you know, to start with that alignment, and then, you know, have some good definitions, especially when there's more and more parameters, right? Very solid definitions of criticality, for example. So, so yeah, I think you need to put a little more structure around it.
I mean, just to be a little bit more provocative then, just to sort of, you know, whip things up in the last 12 minutes, would it be fair to say that in most large pharmaceutical companies, development has systems A, B, and C, and manufacturing has systems X, Y, and Z? Z for people in Europe. Is that a fair observation? Yep.
Yeah, there's a little bit of overlap sometimes. But
Tiny. I mean, we have to struggle to find it most of the time.
Well, and research also has systems
research.
X, Y, and Z, and 1, 2, 3, 4.
But my point is, brand new shiny tool comes out. Where's the evidence the brand new shiny tool is going to be evaluated by colleagues in different departments that haven't agreed on brand new shiny tool ever before? Where's that cultural management, budgeting, planning process that has never happened before at scale in this industry? Development has done what development needs, and manufacturing has done what manufacturing has needed, and we've got this system here and this system here, and that's the reality,
in real
isn't
big
it?
pharma, you even have multiple developments.
I get it. No, I was just trying to, you know, I guess the appeal right now to the point is, as all these bright new shiny tools comes out, it's an opportunity to actually bridge between development and manufacturing. But the reality is, culturally, it's not happened at any scale in this industry. So it's going to require a bigger change than just bright new shiny thing. My point of view.
Just if I can share my thought, I think that's probably the opportunities exist exactly what you talked about. We are using different systems. But if I use just Takeda as one example, for example, I'm working on the Accenture side. I know one of my former colleagues here. Glad to see you all. We are talking about becoming the launch center of excellence. Launch center of excellence. That means we have to have a particular interaction with our pharma science R&D colleagues. And with this concept in mind, we are starting to look at what type of tools, what type of technology that we can use, both in the pharma science or PD side and also in the manufacturing side.
Right. So you've recognized it and you've started having those discussions and planning processes and so on.
I think using digital as maybe shining topic here that create this opportunity for us to work on this together. That brings me maybe my next question I meant to ask earlier, is that for this team here at YASA, you are at Takeda also, we met before. Is there a North Star that we would like to recommend? Like maybe QbDVision is the one, or maybe something else, right? So is there a North Star that we think that can really promote this bridging between farm science, process development, and the downstream manufacturing operations? Is there something that you have experience with, you have thought about, or you have some action already taken?
So to re-articulate the question and give you at least 7 minutes to think about a reasonably interesting answer, is there a North Star that you could articulate for your organizations that would motivate and address the building of this digital bridge between R&D and manufacturing? Think about that through the next few minutes and then respond to the question. One more question from me and then we'll go to that and wrap. So a lot of what we've talked about is tangentially organizational. People, their jobs, who they report to, decision-making processes, budgeting processes, and so on. 30 years of doing this, I would observe that I've sort of characterized the life sciences industry in my head as R&D, manufacturing, and commercial. That's how I've always thought about it. Everywhere I've worked, there's R&D and there's manufacturing, there's commercial. Would we be better off organizing as R and D and M? Would that be a better way of actually addressing this? And to some degree, you've got pilots or whatever your, sort of centers of excellence trying to nibble at that. But I mean, this is a macroscopic question about the industry. Rather than R&D and manufacturing, would we be better off research and development and manufacturing? And what I'm getting at there is sort of people in jobs, in roles at the C-suite and immediately below, whose job it is to build this bridge. Who are they? So,
I mean, maybe I'll try to answer a little bit of both. And you know, we did do this to some degree when we created the mRNA Center of Excellence, and you know, at least from Legacy Translate Bio, where R&D were more together, we separated research and development and manufacturing still have some separate reporting lines, but they come up together and are a little bit more harmonized. And I think, you know, the North Star that we try to is where at the end of the day, yes, it's a platform, but we're a product company, and you know, the BLA and how the BLA is structured and who's responsible for which part of that is, you know, kind of how we divide responsibility, and the system has to speak ultimately to the BLA. I know that maybe not the answer you were looking for, but that is our
singularly
guiding.
uninspiring.
What's that?
Singularly uninspiring.
Yeah. Okay.
So it probably wasn't what he was looking for, but you know, not to put words in his mouth, but I'd dismiss it.
Yes.
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 Emphatically
Is that
yes.
your North Star? Oh.
No, I just to the answer to your question. I mean, I could probably like wiggle around this answer a number of different ways, but I mean, I would argue that, you know, you'll see Vijay's slides, like that's what pioneering medicines is. Like like the platform companies in Flagship's portfolio are doing discovery and developing platforms, and we are then taking the late stage research and development and moving into manufacturing, and as part of that innovation supply chain partnership with our partners like Novo Nordisk and Pfizer, we will be doing that in collaboration to create value and hopefully
you've sort of done.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come up with it, but I support it, enable it. But a lot of like the execution and the vision of
typing away, sort of editing his slides.
Yeah, he hasn't finished yet. Yeah. No, but I think like the answer is yes. I think, you know, there's probably new business models and new opportunities that, you know, are coming into existence because of the challenge that you outlined, particularly around bigger organizations.
I mean, you've got to think that the faster pace and the complexity arguments would actually lead you in the direction of D&M and the whole bridge thing. I mean, you just think about the hierarchies that exist in most pharma companies today. They're not set up to build this bridge. Yes, sorry, let's get...
Sorry,
Yeah.
it just occurred to me while you were...
No, yep.
It just occurred to me that, you know, CDMOs have been doing this for 20, 30 years, differentiating between R and, you know, D&M. I think if you go to a CDMO and you ask them when they would prefer to receive the project, it would be right after the R.
Yes.
Right, before any D has occurred. And maybe some of the challenges with tech transfer come from that overlap of development in both organizations. Right?
Yep, I think you're spot on.
So anyway, I just thought that while you were...
Rachelle?
Thank you.
Go on. No, hang on one sec. Just,
Yes. So also, I think we would benefit for sure for development and manufacturing working more closely together. There's still a wall to be thrown over from the R to D side, but that's where like the process really becomes the process, and that's where we head into manufacturing. So there's so much synergy that it would benefit us. I think some of the challenges we have beyond just organizationally bringing them together is that system-wise, development's on the ELN with research, and their structure and how they look at data ends up being shared because of that. And then on the manufacturing side, we're moving into MES and these systems. So being able to have a data model perhaps as the North Star, our shared ontology, our CMC structure to our data that kind of regardless of what system it's coming from, does it marry up and come together in service. I think that's something that we have certainly not solved. There's some conversations about how do we get to that and really bridge that aspect of development and manufacturing when they're the data and the processes and how we get work done, and is it GXP and non-GXP, and that kind of makes me crazy of, well, we can't put that in that system because it's a validated system, we won't be able to move fast enough. Like, I think there's things to solve there, but at the end of the day, can we bring the data together is what's going to help us to go fast.
Good one. Quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to add what is mentioned earlier. So we used to say R&D, but technically, historically, we have the CDMO, and then D part is already out from there.
Right.
It's just how we used to say. Even my previous job, we had research as separate, and then development was very within the one building with the manufacturing, and that helped to pace up or go faster with having the product out. So it's already out there, but it's just our mind is set with that way that we used to say R&D, and that's probably the term.
I think a lot flows from that, though, doesn't it? A lot of legacy and a lot of sort of job titles and perceived responsibilities and so on and so forth. So, so Mark, you've got approximately a minute or so to respond to the organisational, but more inspire the question with a North Star.
Yeah, well, I think it's an emphatic yes, and agree with all the above. Research hands over an entity to development who takes it and runs with it, and then it gets scaled out from manufacturing. And it's crazy that there's not a greater connection at a board level. It's kind of at the board level that those organisations operate and reconnect. So that North Star, getting to the North Star point, how often does a head of medicines development or PharmSci gets together with the head of manufacturing operations to decide what their shared ambition is? I can't think of many cases where I've seen a shared ambition between the PharmSci and the global manufacturing network that they've aligned on that North Star. I think that's the trick that needs to be combined, that there needs to be that coalescence of the North Stars that exist in both organisations today. And Whitney's point about the two-way bridge is a beautiful analogy. That bridge needs to be two-way.
Jash's first point, what's Dev's commitment to manufacturing quality? Like something as simple as that, it's just holding each other accountable. But to your point, that starts at setting your strategy for the year too, which is new space.
And I think Rachelle's point on data model is spot on, right? Because if you can't agree on the language that you're speaking, that is the first challenge, right?
I knew you'd say something at some point. You've done really well, a whole hour just sitting there.
I felt like that point really encapsulated that North Star, because then once you've agreed on that, then I think the rest follows a little bit more easily.
So we're bang on time. I got through the whole hour, Luke, without saying gelatinous. And with that, please give our panel a round of applause. Thank you.